Hello, everyone. Today's webinar is on expense management with Databasics. Databasics has been a great partner of ours, and very happy to be recommending them to our clients. Personally, I think it's a fantastic enterprise feel look. It's got mobile, it's got web, it's got everything you need, and really handles the complexities that we're finding across clients, especially those in the mid-size and larger end of Dynamics GP, Business Central, and NAV. We do have a white paper as well talking about Canadian taxes and ability to handle HST and tracking taxes across Canada and the US for your various reporting purposes. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Chris, who will take over into our demonstration and discussions. Chris, let you start with your agenda.
Okay, thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone for giving us some time here this morning to take you through expense automation, specifically how it relates to Dynamics, and then of course looking at North American companies, whether you're in Canada or the U.S., and looking at some of the challenges that organizations have as it relates to expense automation. So the agenda I've got here, I'll give you just a quick background on Databasics, just so you understand how we fit into the larger marketplace, and then we'll take you through a couple slides just talking about what we see as the common goals that organizations are looking to accomplish with expense automation. We'll then talk about really some of the key challenges out there, and then we'll spend really the rest of the time going through and actually looking at the solution instead of having to be tortured by a bunch of PowerPoint slides. I figure it's probably easier to open up the application and take you through and look at some of the common examples and how this works, and then we'll wrap up with any questions that you guys may have as we go through the process. Speaking of questions, I'm pretty sure the GoToWebinar solution does allow you to ask questions as we go through here. So feel free to, again, if you got something, feel free to jot it down in the chat window, and I'll make sure to get to it as we wrap it up here at the end. And as Scott mentioned, we also have a joint white paper that we put together with Endeavour, which talks about, again, some of the challenges that we're going to address here today. Again, from a Databasics perspective, we're headquartered in the greater Washington, D.C. area. We've got two applications that we provide in the marketplace. We're really focused on just one today, which is our expense reporting solution. But the product you're going to look at here today was first released, I should say the first iteration was released in the late 90s. This application really goes back to the first web-based solutions as they approach the marketplace out there. So you're going to certainly see a good deal of development here with over 25 years of development as it relates to what we're providing from a expense reporting perspective. From an organization, we're private, profitable, continue to grow at a pretty healthy pace. I've been within the organization here going on 21 years here this fall. So at this point, have spent almost my entire existence working within the expense and time arena. The application is a global solution, and we do provide global support, and that's something we're going to focus a lot on today as we talk about some of the specific challenges around taxes, currencies, multiple languages, and those items out there. And we've been a Microsoft Dynamics partner since 2003. So again, have a good track record with Microsoft Dynamics. And as we talked about the different platforms that you guys may be deploying today, we've certainly have worked with all of them over the, like I said, at this point, almost 20 years or so. So again, understand what organizations who are running Dynamics are looking for and how we get our application to talk to those solutions. And then really from our personal approach, when Databasics goes into an organization, what we're really looking to do is to take our application and adapt it to the environment and the configuration that the customer wants. We're not in the game of coming into an organization and saying this is the way the application has to work. We understand that everyone does have some unique processes. What you may do, probably 90% of what you do looks very similar to every other company that's out there, but everyone seems to have some areas where they have some unique qualities and characteristics, and we are looking to certainly adapt our solution to meet those requirements. So with that, let's kind of talk about expense management automation. One of the interesting stats out there is that even today, Most organizations, so a majority of organizations in North America, are still using some type of manual process to manage their expense reports. Now, when we say a manual process, that comes in a couple different shapes and forms, of course. And today, what most organizations have is some sort of an Excel spreadsheet that someone has put together, and it may have some ability to do some simple calculations or organize data, but it is still somewhat of a manual process in the sense that once the user provides that information into that Excel spreadsheet, as it flows up the chain into the accounting and finance group, someone has to take that data and organize it appropriately before they move it over to the accounting solution. So from the user perspective, they may say, hey, we have it automated, but in reality, we would still look at that. And the way the industry looks at that is still some sort of manual process. Now, we certainly see other iterations of manual processes. We still see organizations that have paper forms and they ask employees to attach receipts. And then again, however they want to get that into the corporate office out there. But then even looking at that stats, we still do see a lot of organizations that have implemented an automated solution. And it's interesting today, if you look at Databasics, when we look at our new customer base, about 65 to 70% of our new customers are converting off from another system. And for whatever reason, they've decided they want to change the way the process works. So again, when we talk about kind of looking to improve the process, not everyone is coming from a manual process. We still definitely do see organizations making a transition from an existing platform. With that being said, the goal of expense automation, when I go out and talk to organizations, I always kind of break it down into different groups of the organization. And I really look at three core groups out there. I look at the end user and look at the individual challenges that they have as far as what the organization wants to provide to them. I then look at kind of the supervisor, manager, the individuals that are responsible for making sure that employees have submitted that information and make sure that they have approved appropriately. And then I look at kind of the administration side as it relates to accounting, finance, and executives who are looking at ways to make sure that they are enforcing the policies that need to be enforced, and that they are looking to go ahead and provide an easy way to get information into the accounting system. So as you look at this goal of what we're trying to simplify, these are really the key areas. The first one, of course, is the user experience. How do we provide a process out there that we get all the information that we need from the users, but we do it in a fashion that's not going to be overly burdensome, and of course, not take too much time. If you go out and talk to organizations and talk to employees who are doing expense reports, they always say it takes way too long and the organization requires too much information. But oftentimes it's because they don't understand why that information needs to be provided, whether it's for tax purposes, whether it's for GL mapping or other reasons out there. But the employee always feels as if the organization is trying to torture them with the expense reporting process. The next part we're trying to simplify is approvals and workflows. How do we get an expense report, once completed by the user, to the appropriate individuals so that we can get that approved and work through the approval chain quickly so that we can, again, account for those expenses and then reimburse the employee. And then we start looking at items that are really out of the control of the organization, which is that we've got government compliances out there. So we may have, as we talk about provincial taxes, we may have different thresholds as it relates to mileage reimbursement. And so we look at just some of the external factors that are put on the organization that are pushed down to the user to make sure that they are providing the appropriate details as it relates to those compliances out there. We then look at what I call the corporate controls. So these are going to be kind of your compliances and your business policies, but these are going to be the ones that are specific to the individual organization. So these are going to be items such as, do we allow an employee to be reimbursed for alcohol? Do we allow a user to spend a certain amount of money when they rent a car or stay in a hotel? So, and these are the controls that are going to vary organization by organization as it relates to what we're going to ask and allow the employee to do. We then look at just the administration. This is when it comes down to, again, if we're going to put in place controls, what's the burden and how much can we ask the user to provide? And then we get into the accounting and finance group, and I'm looking at the list of individuals that are attending here today. I'm going to assume most of you probably fall into that category, which is that you're looking to find a way to simplify getting the data that you require from the user and get that data into the accounting system so that you can go ahead and do your task as it relates to the accounting. And really, as I go out and talk to organizations, that's the number one kind of overlaying theme that we try to talk about, which is how do we kind of bridge that gap and to create an overall environment out there that we provide the user something that's easy and quick, while still making sure that we are accommodating all of the other controls and compliances that, again, may be put on by the individual organization, or maybe they are controls that are coming down from the government out there. And then the last group out there is those individuals that want to be able to get to data. One of the goals with expense automation is, of course, consolidating the information, getting more detailed information without asking the user to provide much. But lastly, making sure that we can go ahead and to get access to that information. So with all that being said, those are the goals. These are the challenges out there, and this is what we try to tackle as we talk about expense automation. And then we get into the demo here in the showcase, this is what we're going to tackle. The first piece is, of course, receipts and supporting documentation. That is still the most time-consuming and biggest burden on the user, is that the organization in most cases is going to ask them to provide information and that supporting documentation. And so what users end up with, if they're out traveling or even making internal purchases, they end up with a pile of receipts, and they've got to figure out how to get that data from the receipt attached to the expense report, and then of course submit it out there. We then, again, we talked about kind of federal directives. So things like, we have different thresholds out there as it relates to mileage tracking. We have province-specific tax rates out there. And again, the burden is pushed down to the user for how do we get that person to provide the right information. Do they understand the rates? Do they understand what province they're in, how those rates vary out there? And so it starts to add in an extra layer. And it's not only province specific. Of course, as you start traveling internationally, if you go into Europe and look at VAT and some of these other areas out there, the taxes are going to change as the user starts to travel outside his or her own home area. And then, of course, we look at multiple languages. Certainly within Canada, we look at 2 languages. Depending on how international your organization is, you may have more than that. If you go south here of the United States, we look into Mexico, so we start looking at Spanish. And so the question is, how do we take the application and make it so that if we have individuals speaking multiple languages, or not necessarily multiple languages, but they need to access it in their home language, that they're able to access the solution there within their home language. International travel, that's probably one of the biggest things we see within companies traveling or headquartered in Canada or in the US that may have office locations in different countries out there. Especially when it comes to dynamics, you start looking at a multi-company environment, you may have intercompany transactions out there. So we'll talk about how we can address those. Corporate policies, again, we've mentioned a couple times here that individual organizations have different policies, and you may have different policies as it relates to those individual users. And then the last piece here is that as we are going to talk about integration, not all organizations have a single environment out there as it relates to what they have on the accounting front. So when we look at expense management, we may be getting employee information from an HR system. We may be passing information into for employee reimbursement, it may be going into a payroll system. And then, of course, we have our GL mapping. And if we're doing any expense management for billings, we may be pushing that information into a different system. So as we look at the ecosystem out there, it may be a single system, it may be multiple systems out there. So that's going to be kind of the challenges, is how do we take all of these items and simplify it into a process that's going to work well from an expense management perspective. And really what we're going to talk about today is how we can address all those with technology. And there's really 3 main things that we're going to talk about here at how we address those key challenges out there. The first one is automation. A lot of the challenges that I just listed there, we can address through automation. The second piece is how we deploy these solutions out to users. How do we get them with a platform that's going to be quick, simple, and easy, and to make sure that they can get to this information no matter where they are, no matter what device they may have in their hands. And then the last piece here is through integration. If we can automate a lot of these processes and quickly get information from the user and then integrate it, the goal for us is that instead of using your accounting and finance group as a group that needs to be collecting data, reviewing data, doing detailed audits, and then taking that data and organizing it to be pushed over into an accounting system or even keyed into an accounting system, that group can now become someone who simply reviews data, addresses exceptions, and then again, just monitors to make sure that we've got the right data being flowing through that system. So ultimately, there's a very large ROI. So how do we do that? And so the way we do it, and we're really going to talk about kind of a, in this case, the Databasics solution, is that we're going to do it through a piece of software that's going to be deployed in the cloud, which is pretty much the standard these days as you look at expense solutions. At this point, really, everyone's providing applications in the cloud. In our instance, what we would always provide you as an organization, you'd have two instances, so you would always have a test and a production environment running out there. When we engage a customer, we would go through a detailed business analysis step, and the idea is that you want to have the application configured specifically to your individual requirements. So as we were talking earlier about some of those federal directives, of course, that information would be automatically set up in the solution so that we can capture things like, tax calculations and other items out there. But if you do have individual requirements as it relates to corporate policies or special workflows, you want to be able to make sure the application can be configured specifically to your requirements, and that's what we would do. We want to set up bidirectional integrations. Now, these bidirectional integrations can be taking place through a single platform. So if everything comes through Dynamics, we can very easily create that integration so it would flow back and forth between Dynamics. If you happen to be deploying a corporate credit card, so you're working with a bank and you want us to be able to pick up that corporate credit card data, we can pick that data up and pull it over to our application. Maybe you reimburse employees through a third-party payroll system. So what we would ultimately look to do is to set up those integrations, make sure those integrations are seamless. So again, the idea here is that you're not having to manipulate or manage data before it comes to our solution or goes out of our solution. But the fact that we have these integrations and that data is going to flow bi-directionally. And again, I can talk a little bit more about that as we get into the demo as far as the frequency and how often people may want to push and pull that data. Access through mobile apps or desktops. Again, I'll show you in just a minute what that looks like. Everything that a user is able to do on the desktop these days, they should be able to do in the mobile apps. There should be no reason for a user to have to open up his or her computer or PC. The mobile app should give them a good, strong user experience, regardless of those policies that you may have in there. So again, a mobile app should not be a light version today. And then we'd look at global localization. That's really as we start looking at how do we take the solution, and again, if you do have users, let's say in Canada and the US, how do we set that application up so that the Canadian users are going to have their default currency is Canadian dollars, the US users in US dollars, or maybe again, if we have a user who wants to access the tool in French, that they see that in French. And so the idea here is that we should make the user experience specific to where he or she may be throughout the world. And then, of course, we also leverage that with security roles and access rights. So how do we make sure that the user's only seeing the information that he or she should see? How do we make sure that we have administrators that have the ability to manage those parts of the solution they need to manage? And then, of course, in the end, make sure we have strong reporting. I would say reporting is still, even if you look at organizations that have automated and have deployed a third-party expense reporting tool, reporting is still the biggest laggard, I would say, as it relates to where organizations still don't do much. One of the key advantages of an expense reporting platform is it gives you real-time access to a lot of data. And real time means that we don't need to wait for an employee to have an expense report that's approved. But with the reporting and the data you have there, you can really get to any piece of data. A lot of our customers do budgeting through the application. So what that would allow them to do is, let's say they have an event and they're sending a number of employees to this event. They can go into the application and say, these are all the users who go into the event. This is the amount we have budgeted for it. And every time the user goes in to create an expense against that event, they would basically pick a project code or an activity code as it relates to the event they're going to. And what the application will do is it'll allow the organization to see exactly what they've spent as it relates to those individual events out there. And you can also do that with a kind of a pre-trip or a pre-purchase authorization. So you can even look at kind of committed funds versus actual funds within that. So the reporting portion of these expense reporting tools really give you access to a lot of data that you just don't have, especially if you're leveraging a manual process. So once we, kind of put this all together in an application, what are we able to simplify? And these are really the big things you're going to look at. First and foremost, mobile apps. I just mentioned a minute ago that that's really the biggest piece for the users out there. But it's not only mobile apps, it's also OCR, so optical character recognition, which gives the user the ability to take a picture of a receipt or upload a receipt or email a receipt into their individual environment. Once it's there, what the OCR technology will do, it'll actually read the data right off that receipt and pull it over into the expense report. That would also include tax information. So as it relates to the ability to start to lessen the burden on the user, a user can simply come in the application, take a picture, have all the receipts and upload them and let the application read that data and pull it over into the solution. Automatic tax calculations. Again, we'll show you that here in just a second as it relates to the solution. The application will recognize what province a user may be in if we're talking about Canada. It'll look at the expense type out there and can go in there and automatically calculate the appropriate provincial tax. So we'll look at HST within a couple examples out there. It'll also recognize if a user has moved out of that individual province. So let's say we've got a user who's traveling from Canada in the US and they're picking up an individual expense, but we don't need to be capturing those additional tax details. Or again, if we've got someone traveling to Europe or some other countries out there. The application can go in there and automatically recognize what the tax rate is, when that rate changes, and go in there and create those auto calculations for a user. Now, for those of you that maybe don't want to have the application automatically calculated, we can certainly turn that off and basically have, just fields where the user can go ahead and free key that data into the solution. So you've got a couple different options as it relates to that. Multiple languages. Again, the application can be deployed today in about 14 different languages. The user accesses just in whatever his or her preferred languages. So again, if I were to do my expense report in French, I submit it to my approver who's choosing to review everything in English. I'm going to see it in French. That person's going to see it in English. And again, that would relate to about 14 different languages there within the solution. International currency conversions. Within the solution, we would provide a feed from Owanda. It provides a daily update of currency conversions. So if I have a user out there, again, who's traveling in the US and they're doing an expense report from 3 weeks ago, when he or she goes in to enter that data, the application will recognize the day the expense occurred. It'll go in and create a conversion back to whatever my home currency is so that we can see exactly what those currencies look like, what that currency conversion looks like. And again, they can do this with multiple currencies. So again, if we've got someone who goes to the US, Mexico, and is picking up different currencies there, it'll simplify and bring all that back to the home currency. But it'll also show for those administrators who want to see that information, they can see all that information. The ability to enforce corporate policies. So we've talked a couple times about that, but again, whatever policies that you may have out there, you have the ability to make those specific to you. So you don't have to come into the application and have it just set up with a generic set of policies. If you want to go in and have a policy where you have a certain spend threshold for meals, that's fine. You can set that up. You can set it up to have a certain threshold for certain users and not ones for others. You may say, or you may have a policy that if someone's entertaining people, we need them to provide who the attendees were at that particular meal or event out there. So you have flexibility there to basically set that up and to configure however that's going to take place. Along those lines, you can also then determine what the workflow or notifications look like. So automated workflows in a tool like ours give you the ability to have as many or as few individuals as you need to approve. Those workflows can be driven based upon the spend threshold of an expense report. So let's say someone goes out and spends, let's say they buy a piece of software. It's a $4,000 server, and we want to have the IT director approve it in addition to someone else out there. The application can recognize what those workflows look like and then make sure we get the right individual approving it. Along those lines, we can also have notifications. So for a user, if let's say I've got credit card transactions and I need to get them submitted before the month is over, I can go in there and the application will send a notification to me to make sure I get that provided. Seamless integrations, we've talked a bit a few slides ago about integrating this application. And so we would look to tightly couple this with whatever tools you have in place, whether that's talking about your corporate credit card, your accounting system, however you want to reimburse the employees out there. But that integration should be seamless. It should be as simple as someone just reviewing it and saying go, and it would push that data over. And then lastly, real-time access to data. So you have the ability to go in the solution and to quickly access that data. And again, irregardless of where that sits in the approval process, if a user goes in and just simply enters in one transaction, puts it on hold, they can go ahead and see that information. And one slide I have here before we jump over and actually looking in at the demo of the solution is just talking about from the integration perspective. So I know we've got a couple different Dynamics platforms that are represented on this call. Our application gives you the ability to really have a seamless interaction there. Now, one of the things that we would certainly do, as I mentioned, is sit down with the organization and go through a detailed business analysis step. And so we would look at really how you're leveraging expense reports. And truth being told, when we would implement a tool like this, we kind of work backwards. We start by looking at your accounting setup, your chart of accounts, what's the structure. We look at what you're trying to accomplish in the accounting side, and then we basically work backwards into the actual platform to then make sure we provide the appropriate information for the individual user. And then, of course, making sure that we're providing a process that's going to be as simple as possible for the users. Because one of the advantages when you have an automated tool, especially when you compare it to something like an Excel spreadsheet, is there are certain levels of data here that we can set up to be pre-populated and put behind the scenes. So a user can go into the application and pick something like, let's say, an airfare, and they don't necessarily have to know what the GL code is. So we don't have to have them pick a certain code out there. We can put all that data together before we move it over into Dynamics for you. So, and again, I won't spend too much time talking about this today, but I know certainly Scott and his team and our team would be happy to do a deeper dive with you as it relates to how this data integrates, and of course, if there's any specific challenges that you guys have, if you want to know how we can address that. So with that, I'm going to take a breath, and then we can jump over and actually start looking here at the actual solution. So, couple things here about the application. And I apologize, I'm looking over here because my screen's over here as it relates to this this particular environment here. So, couple things here about the Databasics platform. As I mentioned before, we would certainly look to tailor this specific to your individual requirements out there. So when you look at the demo I'm taking you through here today, there may be some certain items there that you guys may have different labels, different names, or whatever else out there, and that's just fine. Those are items that would be tailored specific to your individual organization. The other piece about this, and if there is anyone from the IT side sitting in on this particular call, the application can be accessed in a single sign-on environment, so the user doesn't have to log in every time, the way I just went through there. This can sit within your individual portal out there, and we can authenticate through single sign-on. The environment you're looking at here, you're looking at the desktop display as far as how the application is accessed through the web. Everything that I'm able to do here today through this web interface, I can do on my mobile platform as well. So there's no loss of functionality. As a matter of fact, I can move between my mobile and web interface seamlessly. So if I wanted to start here and finish on my phone, that's fine. If I wanted to go in, move on my phone, that's fine. Truth being told, that's what I do mostly with my mobile app. And then the last caveat I'll mention here today is, of course, I mentioned Databasics does also have a timesheet platform. You can disregard all the details as it relates to timesheets on here. In your environment, you would have just access to the expense unless, of course, you were deploying our time solution. So with that being said, let's jump in and kind of look at some of the details and action that we just talked about here for the last few minutes. So as I come in as an individual user, what we try to do is to put information in front of the user that's going to be relevant to what they need right off the bat. So you'll see here, the first thing the user can see right now is that they have access. They currently have 34 credit card transactions outstanding. So of course, we do have the ability to integrate this data, and the user is going to see right off the bat the ability to get to those credit card transactions that he or she needs to get to. This person also happens to be an approver, and they can see right now that they've got an expense report out there to approve. The expense report that I've been working on is right here in the center of the screen, so I can actually open this one up and start going through and entering information. But before I get there, I want to talk about really the first big burden and what we're looking to address from a user perspective. So I mentioned earlier that the number one burden for users and the number one complaint we hear is the process that the organization requires for receipt and to capture receipts and provide receipt details. What Databasics provides each individual user is a receipt library. This receipt library gives a user the ability to capture receipts and upload them into the solution. Now, in this particular case, you're looking at a Hertz receipt. The way this Hertz receipt got into the platform was I returned a car. They emailed me my supporting documentation. And what I did, I just basically forwarded that receipt to an email address that we provide. So each organization would have basically a generic email address. The user would have the ability to go in there and just simply forward receipts. Our application recognizes who it's from and drops it into this individual receipt library. So a user can come in here, they can email receipts in, they can upload receipts, or they can even take pictures of receipts. So you don't have to turn your head sideways, but that's a receipt that I took a picture of with my mobile device. And again, you're looking at this here through the web experience. When I take a picture of my mobile device in the app, it uploads it right up here into the web experience. But the part about this that we just want to focus on here is that each individual user is going to have basically this receipt library that's going to allow them to organize and capture receipts. And I'm going to show you here in a second how we can take that receipt and actually upload it right into the application, and the solution will read all the data. So we're going to go ahead and actually start opening up this individual expense report that we've been working on. Now, the first thing here we come in to do an individual expense report is that we're going to have a cover page which allows the user to capture some key information as it relates to the user. So the first thing you'll see here is it asks like a business purpose, the dates of travel, and again, these date formats can be switched up depending upon the format the individual wants. And then this one is actually asking what province I happen to be traveling into. Now, the reason it's asking for that is we're going to leverage that to start looking at some of our provincial tax calculations here within the solution. And then at the bottom part of the page, and again, it depends on the type of organization that would be sitting, on this call, is it's also giving me the ability to go in and track these expenses against a particular project or activity. Now, in this particular case, this is going to be my default project. But if I want to come in here and look at a list of other projects that I can track to, I can very quickly get in there and see those projects. Now, this would be part of the accounting integration that we talk about. So if you happen to be an organization that is looking to track expenses against a particular project or activity, and you're keeping that project or activity information in Dynamics, this would be information that we'd be pulling over so that when we get to the user, he or she can quickly provide that information and drop it into the tool. You'll also notice it has my default organization and business unit. So again, from a user perspective, I don't need to provide that information out there. So the first expense I'm going to go in and drop in is just, I'm just going to put in an office supply just to kind of show you how this process looks. So as we start to enter information into the application, down the left side of the screen, we're going to create the summary level detail of the expenses. I should have mentioned the list of expense types here would be reflective of whatever expense types that you need as an individual organization. So again, this can be tailored specific to you. Once I have that information over here, I have just some basic information that we're going to ask the user to provide as it relates to this. So what date was the purchase? How much was it? Now you'll notice this has picked up over here that my default currency is Canadian dollars. And what I've actually shown here, and what you'll see here, is that the application, as I when I select this, I said the tax was included. And what it did, I said it was 123 Canadian dollars. I said tax are included. And what you'll see here is that it automatically went in there and pulled out the HST as it related to that based upon the calculation that I want to have in there. So from a user perspective, all I needed to provide was just the total amount. The application went in there and provided the calculation based upon that information. Now, there are some other details here. So obviously it picked up, again, I've got where the province is. I recognize that this is paid by the employee. I also have the description. This happens to be office supplies. If I wanted to track this information against a particular project, I could have used the default project that I had out there at the beginning, or I can come in here and actually, again, select a new project, or I can put multiple projects in there. So what I have created is a single line item right now. It's got, this is a office supply purchase for $123. It's showing this is reimbursable back to me. And what you're seeing from the user perspective is it's a very kind of clean, simple screen, but behind the scenes, this is picked up, again, the department the user sits in, their home currency, how this GL mapping needs to take place. And again, if there's any sort of project or cost allocation taking place there within the solution. So from a user perspective, we try to make this as quick and simple as easy to provide those details. Now, the other piece here is I could go in here and add a receipt. And when I go to add a receipt, I can add a receipt. I can pull off of that list of receipts that I already had. I can upload a receipt on the fly. Or again, if I was into my mobile app, I could take a picture of it right there and upload it right into the solution. I'm going to hold off on a receipt here because I'm going to show you in just a second how we start doing some of this with the OCR technology. So I've got this office supply, again, defaulted my user here in Canadian dollars, and I've got my provincial tax calculation taking place. Well, let's say I wanted to leverage the OCR technology. Again, this is going to be more common of what's taking place out there. I'm going to come in here and look at my list of receipts. Now, one of the things we can do here is these receipts happen to be, this receipt this user has, this happens to be a trip, I'm trying to see where they, oh, it looks like they were in Palm Springs, California. So this would be me as a Canadian user. I've got a receipt here from travel that I took to California last January. For me to add this receipt to the platform, I can just come in here, select this receipt, hit next, and what you'll see here is the application is reading the data right off the receipt. So what you'll see, it recognized that was from January 1st of 2020. It picked up the total amount. It also picked up the tax amount. It picked up that this was Hertz. It's also recognized this is in US dollars. And so what you'll see here is that as it gets converted over, what we're seeing here is that I should take a step back there. What it's also doing is it's mapping it to the appropriate expense type. So we're doing our GL mapping here. We're recognizing that's a rental car expense. And what we'll see here is as we drop it into the report, it's going to also do the currency conversion for me. So it took that transaction here, which was 131 US dollars. It looked at the exchange rate for Canadian dollars, and this would be the exchange rate as of January 22nd of 2020, and converted it to my home currency of Canadian dollars out there. So as you looked at this, kind of this overall transaction, we're now showing how the application can leverage international currencies in there. What you're also noticing is that in this case, because it was in the US, it's not picking up any of the tax calculations, where if I go to this office supplies here in Ontario, it's picking up the HST calculation. So this is just giving guys kind of a couple different scenarios how, based upon individual expense types, different corporate policies, you can have different data set up there. And of course, if I wanted to see the receipt on that screen, I can go ahead and open this up and I can see that Hertz receipt sitting right here. So we've brought all that information together for the user. And as it relates to that individual user, I could continue to work my way through these additional transactions out there. And again, just go through, I could go ahead and I could have added all those receipts at the same time if I wanted to. So I could have selected 10 receipts and gone ahead and pulled them over. The only other piece there I'm sure people have questions about is corporate credit cards. You'll see this particular user does have a list of credit card transactions. So if I want to go in there and add these transactions, I would just basically select the transaction and drop it over into the expense report. If I was leveraging the OCR technology, the application will go out there and read the receipt. It'll match it to the corporate credit card transaction, and then it'll drop it all into the expense report. So going back to kind of that streamlining the process as it relates to the user, it should be as simple as the user going in there, selecting the receipts, moving them through the process, and then dropping them over into the expense report. And again, the entry is as quick as that. The other piece out there, and again, this is just thinking some of the questions that people ask us, is with the OCR technology. How accurate is it? And I say it's pretty accurate. When you're looking at receipts out there, PDFs that are coming from hotel chains and car rental locations, it's going to read that data. For users taking pictures of receipts, common receipts out there, it'll read those well. But if for some reason someone had a receipt that was sitting in their pocket crinkled up and the OCR didn't pick up all the appropriate details, the user, when it goes through that process, they can go in there and basically quickly enter in whatever information it read, or if it for some reason missed a number, it'll also pick that up within the solution. Once I'm done with this expense report, I can save it and continue working through it, as I continue my travel or make other purchases, or I can go ahead and submit this off into the approval process. In this case, just for time purposes, we're going to submit this off into the approval process. What we'll see here is that this expense report has been released. What you will see is that it's going to create a workflow. And so what you can see here, if I make it a little larger, is that we're going to have details as it relates to this user. And what we can see here is that there is the details as it relates to the user. I can then see who's going to be approving it. I can see the audit trail, so I can see that this was released here on April 27th at 11:41 a.m. And then I can see the individuals that are going to be part of that approval process. And in this particular case, this is actually a project-based approval. This is an AP and then a finance approver, so you can have multiple people out there. You can give them different rights as far as whether they can approve, whether they can modify, but they would certainly be notified of those expenses. I'm going to sign out here and jump in as the approver. Again, this approver would have received an email letting he or she know that they need to go in and approve an expense report. Here we go, this one. So it would have shown them a view that looks similar to this. And then what I can do is I can come in here, and actually if you're looking at this one, this is kind of a couple different scenarios. You'll see this one's got alcohol and exchange rates. But what it gives me the ability to do is I can come in here and I can approve or reject by individual line item. If I reject something, it's going to ask me why I've rejected it. It allows me to provide the details around it. But for time purposes today, I'm going to approve this expense report. And once it approves it, it's going to leave my queue. And then again, me as this individual approver, you'll notice that that left my list as far as those expense reports to approve. It would continue to work its way through the process. Once those expense reports are approved, they're basically going to queue up in the administrative module waiting for whoever wants to post that data to post the data. I'm going to jump over and kind of show you what that view looks like. So we're going to make the transition over to the administrative module. And again, today we won't go through too much data as it relates to the administrative module, but what you will see is there is the ability within the admin to come in here and have dashboards, and you can have different dashboards out there. Again, if you're leveraging corporate credit cards and you want this to show you a credit card reconciliation report, or maybe you're just looking at spend broken down by individual department or certain expense types out there, you can have that, but you can have a dashboard out here that's going to show you the information. But what you have in this tool, and I've mentioned a number of times today, is real-time data. This is an expense report search tool. And what this is this is a tool that allows you to go in there and to filter and find the expense reports that you may be looking for. And so in this particular case, what I have on the right side of the screen is the ability to filter and find information based upon all the variables you're looking at here. So you'll see I can come out here and say, show me all the expense reports for the employees who last letter starts with H, who work within this department. And so I can go out and find that, or I can say, you know what, I'm looking for all the expense reports that happen to relate to this particular project. Or for this particular department. So you can go out there and find that information. And once you have it, you then have the ability to come in here and to really do whatever you want with the expense report. So this is the report we just did a few minutes ago. As the administrator, I can come in here, I can change the status of it. I can change the workflow routing. So if I want to go out here and maybe add someone else to the workflow, I can go out and do that. Or maybe it's a Friday afternoon, I just want to get these all approved so we can go home for the afternoon or for the week. I can come in here and auto approve all those reports out there. Or maybe I want to see a detailed audit report. Regardless of what you're trying to do here, you have the ability to very quickly get to any piece of data that you want. You have querying tools that allow you to slice and dice that data, again, in any fashion you want. And it's all real time. So again, if you've got an employee who maybe they're out sick and they can't get into the tool to go out there and to complete something, you can go and do that on their behalf. The only other thing I would mention here, as you look at the Databasics platform here, I mentioned earlier that one of the things we look to do is to configure the solution to your requirements. We're not talking about customizations, but what you have here within the tool is the ability to very quickly and easily make modifications and changes. So as I was going through and showing you that individual environments out there, this is how we manage expense types. And when we go in there to set up an individual expense type, this is how we go in there and modify and change what sort of fields show up out there. And so, when we look at an organization that may be headquartered in Canada, but then have offices in the US, this is how we go in and basically set the application up so that we can have, expense types that look the same. Maybe it says airfare to both users out there, but in fact, we have different GL mappings in the background, or maybe we've got different tax codes or information that we need to capture out there. So ultimately, the strength here of a tool like this is that you can manage this all through a web front end. These are not customizations or getting in and writing code. And then the last thing I was going to mention out there is there is also a built-in audit utility that sits within the platform. So depending upon when and where in your process that you go out and review data, with this audit utility, it allows you to go out and create queries. So again, as an organization, you can go out and say, this one's just showing all transactions that are great, all reports that have transactions that are greater than $100. But you can go out there and say, show me all the transactions where people had business meals or entertainment expenses. And what you have here is it's going to pull up that query. And again, this is the same report we were just working on a few minutes ago. But I can come in here and again, if I want to see in a single view here, the ability to, look at these receipts, I can then come in and approve or reject, or again, have my own modification as it relates to what I'm doing there from an audit perspective. And again, this utility here is something that comes standard within the platform and allows an organization to modify it in any capacity possible. And then really the only other thing I'd mention is that we do also have kind of a power reporting tool that would sit on top of the solution. So earlier you're looking at some of these utilities where I had the ability to go out there and to again, query real-time pull information. We also do have kind of your traditional reporting tool that would allow you to go out and do some of those heavy reporting and also distributions to individual users out there. So with that, that was really a high-level overview of what we're looking at there from an expense reporting perspective. I'm going to turn the floor back over to Scott. But again, any questions you guys may have, please let us know. And then just a reminder, we do have a paper out there as we talk to specifics about how we're able to handle Canadian requirements around taxes and some of the other areas out there that if you've got any questions or would like to review that, please feel free to do that. So with that, let me turn this back over to Scott.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was fantastic. Definitely appreciate your time today. This was a great overview and showcase. For those that are new watching this recording or new to Endeavour, I've been around for 30 years now. Key lines of business, advisory, implementation, and ongoing optimization and support of Dynamics GP, Dynamics NAV, and Business Central, as well as the rest of the Microsoft cloud solutions, being Microsoft 365, Office 365, Azure, Dynamics 365 CRM, and the Power Platform. You may notice two logos. So GP Support North is a sub-brand of ours focused on Dynamics GP, and then Endeavour Solutions being our main company. So feel free to reach out to members of our team, Trish, James, and Steve. Phone numbers are here on the screen or email addresses. Otherwise, visit us online, and there's a variety of connection details. So with that said, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.